So it's interesting to me that the president is running away from the Constitution, whereas I'm running towards it. I'm running towards the Constitution. You'd like to think that the common law of America would be the Constitution. Isn't that where the common law would begin? So here's a couple of examples of ways that this administration is running away from the Constitution and our founding fathers and our founding documents. So Donald had said in an interview with Terry Moran that he didn't know if we should uphold the Constitution. Shouldn't we? Aren't you supposed to uphold the Constitution? I don't know, Trump says, which is in spite of his oath of office. His oath of office says that he was, going to love and defend and support the Constitution. He also didn't know what the Declaration of Independence was in that same interview with David Moran, or Terry Moran, who was fired. ABC News just fired like a 28-year veteran. But Donald had said about the Declaration of Independence was that it was a document about peace, love, and friendship for everybody. Friendship for everyone. The Homeland Security Secretary, Noam, didn't know what habeas corpus was. Noam had said that habeas corpus was a right for the president to override America's individual freedoms. She got that 100% backwards. That's an American individual freedom. So we have the right to, you got to have a reason to arrest somebody. That's what a habeas corpus is. You got to have a reason to arrest somebody. It's not a very hard bar. You could just make up the damn reason. So anybody that's trying to get away from the habeas corpus thing, it's like, we kidnapped that guy. Why'd you do it? I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you at all. Stephen Miller is actively trying to get past the habeas corpus. He's trying to get rid of the habeas corpus. That's what he said in an interview, just blatantly. Congress has the power to override habeas corpus during times of invasions and other emergencies, but not the president. Even when Lincoln had suspended habeas corpus because the Confederates had taken over Maryland, ultimately Congress retroactively gave him that power. So Congress retroactively said that it was okay that habeas corpus had been suspended for the case of Maryland. The right to habeas corpus, freedom from bills of attainder, no ex post facto laws, the right to contract, these are all freedoms that are found within the body of the Constitution. You'd like to think that the Bill of Rights are venerated. You'd like to think that the Bill of Rights are canonized, right? These are codified. These are etched and chiseled in stone forever and ever and ever. You have these freedoms, right? I'd like to think that law enforcement, you got like 10 felonies. Here's the felonies, categorical imperatives that you can't cross. And then here's 10 freedoms that you can't cross. So the government both protects our rights and freedoms and it punishes those who would do the worst crimes out here. You'd like to think that's the case. But the body of the Constitution, it's not just the Bill of Rights. Right around where habeas corpus is, we also have a freedom from a bill of attainder. We also have no ex post facto laws. So we have a freedom from ex post facto laws. We also have the right to contract. And then these freedoms are within the body of the Constitution. So it's not just our Bill of Rights. We got freedoms after the Bill of Rights. We got freedoms before the Bill of Rights. Now, ultimately, the president is going to comply with the 9-0 SCOTUS decision. Noam v. Garcia, 2025. Ultimately, he did. But for 2 months, he was, floating the idea of just, brazenly break it, just like Worcester v. Georgia, like Andrew Jackson. And he's going to comply with it 2 months later. But he was talking about, just being contemptuous of it, just like I'm supposed to follow this thing. And then they had the El Salvador president. They were laughing. How am I supposed to do that? I can't do that. What am I supposed to do? So the president was playing games with a 9-0 Supreme Court decision. 9-0 Supreme Court decision, unanimous. You got 6 are conservative and then, originalist. And so the fact that he was playing with he was so contemptuous for 2 months of a unanimous 9-0 Supreme Court decision is incredible. Inadvertently, they're going to comply with it 2 months later, but they're going to change the narrative, right, with the Tennessee indictment. So the decision, Noam v. Garcia 2025, was made April 10th, 2025. And then Abrego, let's see, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was returned June 6, 2025. That's nearly 2 months later, right? So 2 months later, he complied, but then now they're saying that the point is moot because he has to deal with the charges in Tennessee. So now they don't have to do the thing in Maryland anymore. Now, so it's he complied, but he changes the narrative, into a different way. Pete Hegseth just said that district courts have no business ruling on national security issues, that he wasn't going to abide by district courts. He demurred to the Supreme Court. He's like, yeah, the Supreme Court maybe. So maybe the Secretary of War Defense will comply with a Supreme Court decision, but he doesn't seem like he's going to give a damn about what the appeals and district court says. The appeals court said that. The district court said that. Who gives a crap? That's Pete Hegseth. Donald said that America is a government of men, not of laws. This is the opposite of what the founders had said. We're a government of men, not of laws. John Adams, Thomas Paine, they both said that we're a government of laws. And I love the ideal. I love the ideal of it, so I guess it's probably a balance between the two. But the idea that we're a government of laws, nobody can break the law. So you can't take away people's rights and you can't commit injuries, major injuries towards anybody because the law says so. But Donald says the opposite. He said, no, we're a government of men, laws be damned, right? Who cares? So Thomas Paine said that we're going to break the monarchical crown into a million pieces. And instead of worshiping the king in America, the king is the law. No, the king is not the law. The law is the king. So according to Thomas Paine, the law is king. We're going to be a nation of laws and not of men. And then John Adams said that we're an empire of laws, which is interesting. An empire of laws, a nation of laws, a country of laws. But I like that because that shows the ideal. That means our laws are going to be so good here that the rest of the world will just say, look at how they do, how they do with their laws there. Hitler said he wanted to smash the Constitution. So the contract between the people and the government was going to bend to Hitler's will. Whereas you have Thomas Jefferson was racking his brain over whether the Louisiana Purchase was consistent with the United States Constitution. So my understanding of the Constitution and the power of the president is that the president can't do anything that the Constitution or Congress doesn't give permission to. Now Hitler, he wanted to smash his own constitution, make the contract between the people and the government bend to his will, instead of governing as the parliament or the Reichstag and the Constitution had said. The Trump administration has deported at least 10 Americans, maybe more. So 10 plus Americans have been deported. Americans who were born in this country got deported. They were born here. That makes them Americans. Trump administration has also been arresting judges. So the executive branch, they want to say that they get immunity, right? But if the executive branch gets immunity, then wouldn't the legislative and the judicial branch, wouldn't they get immunity as well? Democratic politicians are being assassinated. Minnesota has lost their Democratic majority. In Noam v. Garcia 2025 case, Pam Bondi demoted a U.S. government lawyer because he had admitted that the U.S. government had made an error. He admitted that the government had made an error when it came to the Garcia case. A previous U.S. court had issued a don't deport order, and yet they deported him. So when they said, well, why did that happen? What's the evidence against him? And he's like, I don't know. And then it was like, well, what about this, previous ruling? Well, looks like we made an error. Well, now they're saying, well, he admitted to it. You're not supposed to admit to anything. That's the worst crime ever. The order was broken. And Erez Ruvini, the name of the lawyer is Erez Ruvini, he was demoted. He was demoted because of that. And his boss, August Flint J., was demoted as well for failure to supervise a subordinate. And why was Erez Ruvini demoted? Because of insubordination? He was supposed to be zealous. He wasn't zealous enough, is what I want to say Pam Bondi had said. How much fealty and allegiance is required? Are you supposed to lie for your fear? Are you supposed to lie and then, make up evidence and then make up trumped up charges and then plant some evidence? Is that what you need to do? Because when I read this one book about Scalia, Scalia was talking about how you don't want to defend the indefensible. Lawyers should not defend the indefensible. So why was there a previous order that said don't deport, and they broke it? What happened there? What was he supposed to say? Well, maybe they got the wording wrong or something. He was just supposed to make up some crap. You cannot defend the indefensible. The reason why Scalia says you can't defend the indefensible, because you'll be viewed as unreasonable. You don't want to be viewed as unreasonable. It's like you're just an unreasonable jerk off. You're not even trying to, you're not even trying to be reasonable. The whole thing with natural law is that we are different from the animals because of our ability to reason. We don't have, much more than the animals when it comes to a lot of animals. They're faster than us, got sharper teeth, sharper claws. It's our ability to use logic. It's our ability to dream of something and to do it, to conceptualize something and to do it. It's our rationality. We are above the animals because of our ability to reason. Reason is the reason why we are above the animals. But if you're just going to be an unreasonable blowhard piece of crap defending your damn client no matter what, making up lies, making up a bunch of trumped up charges, and then, manufacturing evidence, that's going to, that's no good for truth or justice. And law and order is supposed to be sitting upon a foundation of truth and justice. The 3 rules of Roy Cohn, for anybody who had seen the documentary about Donald Trump, the 3 rules of Roy Cohn were 3 rules, okay? So the Trump administration, they say, number 1, admit to nothing. Number 2, attack, attack, attack. And then number 3, declare victory. Do we not see the obvious implications of something like that? Let's everybody do this exact same thing. Admit to nothing, attack, 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 and then declare victory. So a bunch of assholes are going to say that they won even if they lost. Attack, attack, attack. So instead of saying, well, maybe they had this point or that point, don't make any such admissions. Admit to nothing. Admit to nothing. And just say it's that other person and it's the way that they handle themselves, and attack their character, attack their personality, attack the laws that they're using, attack, attack, attack. So you can't even admit to the truth? Talk about being unreasonable. You can't even admit that the grass is green or the sky is blue. You can't even admit that 2 + 2 = 4. You can't even admit that water is wet. Maybe 2 + 2 = tyranny, and maybe water is dry. If the laws mean anything at all, we want lawyers. You can use, truth as a strategy. There's strategic truth. So you can say, this thing had happened and then that thing had happened. But if we're going to deny even the most basic anything, like, it's just incredible that we are getting so far away from the truth. I got this book, Making It Up as They Go Along, and the book is about how, in spite of the court's decisions, behind the cops and courts and prosecutors' decisions, they like to say the people of America does this, and then the law says this. So the justices always pretend that it's the laws, the shape of the laws, their understanding of the laws is the reason for their decision. And so, is that good? Is that bad? That's wonderful. I like to think that the law is the law. The law is unshakable, immovable. If a person broke the law, then they broke the law, then they get punished. But if the Supreme Court is just making it up as they go along, cops, prosecutors, judges, everybody's just making it up as they go along, then it doesn't even, that's kind of a breath of fresh air, because that sounds like the truth. So they're not interpreting the laws and interpreting the laws to, be consistent. They don't have a comprehensive and coherent and cogent, cognizant theory of laws and morality. There's no consistent standards. And since there's no consistency to any of it, then the entire thing may collapse. The entire thing may collapse. Cato said that most of mankind's miseries comes from the oppression of one man. That means everybody else has to live underneath the will, the temper tantrum of some sort of fucking man baby. Most of mankind's miseries come from the tyranny of one man's will. So it's just ironic that the president is running away from the Constitution and I'm running towards the Constitution. Last thing I'll mention is Israel and Iran. So are we going to get into a World War III Seems like he's itching. Seems like he's itching to, you know, bomb Iran. Putting that debate to the side, because they already committed fucking genocide. Now we're going to fucking defend them and while they're bombing other fucking nations and shit. It's almost like they're spoiled, you know, America's spoiled child got itself into fucking trouble. Now it's asking Big Daddy to come fucking rescue them, right? But Thomas Massie, and you've had like 47 co-sponsors of this bill that's saying that the congressional, you can't declare war unless Congress declares a war. It'd be nice to get back to the Constitution. It'd be nice to get back to the Constitution, because who could declare wars? Congress has to declare a war. If the president can just, you know, bomb this person, bomb that person, bomb whoever the hell they want to bomb, we're going to be in these goddamn wars forever and ever and ever. It's so easy to get into a war, and it's so fucking nearly impossible to get out of one. Even Afghanistan, you know, we got out after 20 fucking years. There's people that said that we should stick it out. Fucking Vietnam, same thing. 25 years in Vietnam, and people said, no, we need to have the resolve and just, keep bombing people? The world just saw us help Israel genocide one group of people. And how many, you know, countries is the world going to just step to the side? We're going to genocide another fucking country, unconditional surrender. So what's that mean? Wipe out all of Iran, Persia, Aladdin? We're going to wipe out 1,001 Arabian Nights? I don't know how much the world, you know, even if the world ignores it or doesn't, like, 92 million people's in Iran. And so they're just going to stay within their own borders and just, you know, be like Gaza and get a bunch of bombs dropped on them? No, they're going to fucking fight. And then if they fight, they might get some allies. I heard that Russia and China would defend Iran. And then if we declare war on Iran, 92 million people, I mean, 92 million, that's comparable to 330 million, right? You got 330 million people in America. So that's over 25%. So that's a lot of people. They could just, you know, get on ships and boats and then start doing invasions and shit. So it'd be nice to get back to the Constitution. It would be nice to have one consistent common law for all Americans. I don't want to make it up as we go along. I like to think that rape, murder, you know, stealing, violence, arson, I like to think that nobody can commit a crime against anybody else, so nobody can injure seriously bodily, no violent, serious bodily injury. And then also our rights and our freedoms are being upheld. So you have a list, just to make things simple, here's a list of 10 felonies you can't commit, and then here's a list of 10 freedoms that you can't break. And if the person is guilty and the presumption is great and the evidence is great and it looks like the person had committed a bunch of crimes, okay, you could be lax on the rights and the freedoms. But the whole point of having rights and freedoms isn't so much to give a gift to the people and say, here's your little freedoms. Little civic freedoms are kind of nothing. If you think about the freedom that a criminal has, right? Tony Soprano. What was Tony Soprano allowed to do? Tony Soprano was allowed to do anything and everything that he wanted to. He could commit all the crimes, all felonies. He could just pay some lawyer to, you know, cover his ass. The whole point of the little freedoms when it comes to natural law says that we are born with a right to everything. We're born with the right to everything. And so these civil liberties that we have, the right to speak, the right to petition, the right to peacefully assemble, these are just natural rights that have always been there with mankind. These are the great freedoms of, you know, mankind forever and ever and ever. You can never really stop, you know, these natural rights. But we got to protect our small little civil liberties, because if we don't protect our little civil liberties, then that means everybody will revert back to a right to everything. Instead of having, you know, American freedoms and American rights that we're standing up for, instead it's going to revert back to the right to everything. And a right to everything, if everybody has a right to everything, if everybody's going to be a bunch of Tony Sopranos, well, then that's going to be fucking mad. That's going to be like violent chaos. That's going to be like not just, you know, anarchy and absence of government, but it's just going to be that every, you know, son of a bitch is going to enforce their own sovereignty, and then they're going to go and above and beyond and do all this extra judicial crap. Hobbes says that when everybody has a right to everything, that's going to be civil war, because if I have a right to do as I want to do, not just with myself, but to you too, And a right to everything is a right to anything and everybody all the time, no matter what. To anybody all the time, everything. So you can take whatever you want, break whatever you want, destroy whatever you want. And when it comes to people's lives, enslave them, oppress them, take their things, or just, throw them off a bridge. So if we all have a right to everything, that will lead to a civil war, and then the life of man will be short, solitary, brutish, and awful. Poor, nasty, solitary, brutish, and short. That's why we have to protect our civil liberties. We got to protect our civil liberties, because if we don't, then we revert back to a right to everything, and then that will lead to a civil war. So it's just interesting that my president is running away from the Constitution while I'm running towards the Constitution. The Fifth Amendment says you have a right to a grand jury. That's what the Fifth Amendment says. Okay, I read the Constitution. Sorry, everybody. I actually read the fucking Constitution. But not fucking sorry. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, It's like, Jesus.